Hi, everybody. I'm in the Sierra Foothills at the Murphy's Park, so it might be a little bit noisy, but I want to do something a little bit different outside today. We're talking about a qualified individual with a disability. How do you determine if it's an undue hardship to have an accommodation for an employee? If it becomes an undue hardship or it's unreasonable to provide the accommodation, and the employee is not able to perform the essential functions of the job with the accommodation, they're not a qualified individual with a disability. Now, remember, with the Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act, we have a different criteria. You don't have to perform all the essential functions of the job at a meets expectations level. Any essential functions that you can perform, we want to accommodate unless it's an undue hardship. And if you can't perform the rest, we're putting you on leave under Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act if it's not an undue hardship. And always remember, if you've got FEMLA available and you can't accommodate because it's an undue hardship for Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act or an employee, you're going to be putting them on FEMLA and protecting that job for 3 months. But let's stick to what is a qualified individual with a disability. We are absolutely starting with the essential function job description. Is it valid? Does it have both the physical and the mental requirements of the job so the employee and the medical provider understand what those are to perform each of the individual tasks that are essential so they can determine what the accommodation would be? If you do not have a valid job description at the start of the ADA process, you're not going to be able to introduce one later and say that that's the one you used. Let's make sure the essential function job description is absolutely valid at the start of the process. And please, if you need help, get a hold of a vocational rehabilitation consultant. They really know how to do this stuff. Now, what is the good faith interactive meeting? That's when you're sitting down with that employee and you are going through that job description, function by function, and asking them, how does your disability impact your ability to perform the essential functions of the job? Talk to me. Tell me, how can I help you? That's the goal of a good faith interactive meeting. Because if we make a determination that we cannot help an employee because it's an undue hardship, we want to have an absolute clear record that we have spent the time interacting with the employee and asking them to participate in determining if there's an undue hardship, because we should come to the conclusion together. We want them to say, no, I think I can do this if you did this, if you did this. And then we're going to take a look if we try and do this or that with the supervisor and the department manager to see if those suggestions would work. Remember, the employee knows their disability, the employee knows their job, and they are the ones who are going to be the experts in trying to help you understand how they can perform it. If we really take the time to interact with them, go into Ask Jan and make sure you do that with the employee, because that's a record that you really did your job to identify an accommodation. And then make sure once you have determined the accommodation that you are verifying they can actually perform the job at a meets expectation level. So you're designating and then you're evaluating performance. But if they are unable to perform at a meets expectations level with the accommodation, you're starting back at the good faith meeting again to identify another one. And I will do that 2 or 3 times to make sure that I've really acted in good faith to do my best to accommodate this employee. But if they cannot perform the essential functions of the job at a meets expectations level, they're not a qualified individual with a disability, unless they are pregnant. And then if they meet any of the essential functions of the job, they will be considered a qualified individual with a disability, even if leave is necessary. And of course, leave could be an accommodation for an individual who could not perform the essential functions of the job and needs a couple weeks to recover or a couple months. And that would also be an analysis of whether that's an undue hardship. And if it's not an undue hardship to provide leave, they are a qualified individual with a disability. Now, the Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act is very different. You're determining if they can perform any of the essential functions of the job. And if they can, we're going to accommodate those functions because they want to work and continue making their income. We want to keep them in the employment environment. But if they need to have leave, that would be another accommodation. if it's not an undue hardship. Now let's just go over that good faith interactive meeting process quickly. You're going to designate the employee conditionally for a couple of weeks while you give them time to get that medical certificate for you that will help you define how the disability impacts the ability. We create a really comprehensive medical certificate because we find the doctors do not fill out these forms. They let medical assistants do it or receptionists, and we want to make sure that they understand exactly what we're asking for. Once we've got that medical document, we're going to interact with that employee and continue to designate them conditionally, either on the job or with leave, until we determine whether they are a qualified individual with a disability. We are looking at each of the tasks and asking the employee, can you do this task with your restriction? Do you have the ability to do this task with your restriction? And this includes confirming the reasonable expectation of when they're going to return to work if you're providing leave as an accommodation. Now, what happens if they give you contradictory medical certificates, or the employee says, wait, I don't agree with what the doctor said? Not uncommon in workers' comp leaves or workers' comp restrictions. We're going to need to do a second or third opinion, and we're going to want to make sure that that employee and the doctor are on the same page, because it is very difficult to make a decision about accommodation if you do not have valid objective data to support that request. And what we do is we conditionally accommodate while we ask the employee to get that valid data to support the request. And the timing of that doesn't go on and on and on. We want to get that supporting data within weeks from the employee so we can assist them in staying employed. When you're doing the good faith interactive meeting, you're engaging in the process, you're identifying what the accommodations are. How does your disability impact your ability? Task by task. So we really understand what they're asking for. We're verifying the medical documentation supports it. And then we're going to be discussing with the department manager after the good faith meeting and documentation of that meeting to determine whether there's an undue hardship to accommodate. So thank you, everybody. The qualified individual with a disability assessment is what you are doing during the good faith interactive meeting. It is the most important part of this process if you are going to have to make a determination about an undue hardship. You are documenting what the employee is really saying they can do, and they are telling you, I want to work. And then you're going to the supervisor, the department manager. You may be talking to the safety officer if there's a potential harm or imminent harm that you are anticipating for either the employee, coworkers, or potential clients. So let's really understand the system of qualified individual with a disability. Let's use this terminology with the employee so they understand that this is a process. The ADA is a work regulation, not a leave regulation. Leave may be provided as an accommodation if it's not an undue hardship, because we know when you're returning. But the whole purpose of the American with Disabilities Act is to have employees work with their disabilities. So let's help them do that. Have a great day, everybody.